do you try to write in some fashion every day? I mean, even before the book came out, you're nodding your head no. So are you yeah, go ahead.
I definitely don't. I feel like there's a real, especially with music, it's a real like kind of on and off switch. I tend to feel like I can write pretty quickly, and when I'm off, I'm off, and when I'm on, there like are different stages. So I feel like there's like a collecting like stage where I'm just sort of this absorbent sponge experiencing life in this and art in this different way. And then there's like an actual writing stage. And yeah, I feel very much like on and off with that. With writing the book, I did try to write every day. I tried to write in particular 1,000 words every day,
Yeah.
to just get a ton of raw source material and then just like cut it down in revision.
So with the songwriting, I guess, are you consciously saying, I'm not going to write? What if you just feel like writing that day? Do you say, I
I
know
never
it's a day?
just
You never feel like writing? Okay.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I mean, maybe when I was younger, but like, I just, it's very rare. I don't like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm just like off right now, especially right now because it's like so rooted in like the press and the pushing of the things that I made, that I couldn't even think about writing a song right now. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
it could happen. That would be a beautiful experience. I don't think it's going to happen. I feel like there's like almost a year, like a several month period where like I just like read and like go look at art or watch films or like interact with media in some ways, and I'm like open in this specific kind of way, or I'm like experiencing the world in this way, and that gets filtered into a different stage of writing. But yeah, right now I feel very off.
So is that, when you go experience those other mediums, is there a conscious effort to say, I'm going to look out for stuff? Like you go to an art museum or you
There
watch a
is.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you collect those ideas? Are you putting them in your phone, or quite literally, where are they going?
I usually have like a moleskin that I'll collect, like words, excuse me, sometimes like just like I'll see a word like tactics, and I'll just be like, oh, like that's a great word, and I'll write it down, and then I'll sort of like collect thoughts about, from things that I'm reading, or just like words or sentiments and observations, and then I'll like sit down, and usually I'll write, like I'll look at the book and pick whatever is like calling out to me, and I'll try to create a sound that to accompany a line, and then they kind of work off of each other in this way.
So they're relatively separate then. I mean, you collect those ideas and the music comes separately, then you kind of mix and match.
Yeah, I'd say that is usually how it happens. Yeah.
How often do you use your phone? Do you use the notes app? I have songwriters that tell me, I ask because some of them tell me I have thousands of notes in my thousands of like melodies and words. I never go back to them. Some of them say, oh yeah, that's a big source. So is your phone just filled with all those ideas?
I'm like old school, I guess, and I try to like not do that. I do it sometimes, like sometimes I've been meaning to like keep a notebook by my bed, because a lot, like last night I'm working on an essay right now about my relationship to chess. And like sometimes like an idea will come to me like right before I'm about to go to bed, and I don't have a notebook by me, and then I'll like resort to the phone. But I try to keep a notebook because I don't really like writing on my phone.
So I was going to ask you that later on, but that tends to be, I could probably do an entire website dedicated to the pens and pencils that songwriters use. Very devoted to brand and to color. So how long? Yeah. So first of all, I guess when it comes to lyrics, it sounds like you're a pen and paper person, not a computer person.
You know what it is like I like the moleskins that have no lines, that are like sketchbooks, and then I
Yes.
like writing like all over it, so I can see all of them together. If it's on a phone, then it's like in a line, and I don't like that. It goes against my process. So I do prefer the pen and paper, which maybe makes me ancient, but
No. So Is there a certain color, certain brand of pen? I mean, some
I
people
prefer my
swear by this.
scrolls and stone engravings. I do like a black Uniball.
See, now I want to talk about that blank sheet because I've heard this before. I interviewed Daniel Lanois, the producer, about a month ago, and he told me the same thing. I think all of his songs are an 18 by 22 inch art paper, and he's got thought bubbles, and there's no linear process to it at all. Stuff all over the place, arrows, bubbles, things here, things there. So it sounds like that's a little bit of what you do.
I don't think mine is quite as big, but I just like a lot of the times like I'll collect like phrases or words and they'll all be kind of like spread out on like a blank piece of paper or like a blank page of my notebook. So then I can just like see like 100 words in front of me and kind of pick and choose what to use. Like for instance, I remember I was reading the news and I saw some headline about billionaires buying bunkers, and I just thought that sounded very, like, it didn't sound nice, but it sounded very menacing and scary. But I thought $1 billion bunker for two sounds really good. Or it must have just been $1 billion bunker. And I saw that line in my notebook and then set off on like, oh, okay, like who owns the $1 billion bunker? And then from there it was like, it's a song called Savage Good Boy, and it's about a billionaire who's like trying to coax a young woman to come live with him in this bunker as the sort of world burns around them. And so from there I saw $1 billion bunker and sort of ran with this kind of character. And I think maybe on another page there was something about savage good, because there's like all this meme that's like chaotic evil and wholesome good or whatever. And I like the idea of something being like savagely good, and this man like insisting that he's like the savage good boy, who's like not good at all. So yeah, I feel like it kind of comes together in that way, and I need all of those things to almost like sketch, like from like, what are those things called? Those like numbered dots that you like, yeah.
Yes, oh my God. Yeah, but
like on children's menus or whatever.
Right.
Like,
is it connect the dots, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like a connect the dots, but like with like phrases that could go together, I feel like.
How often do you journal, if any?
Oh God, I wish that I did it every day, because it seems like such a fruitful exercise. And I feel like for the last 5 years, I have made my resolution to journal more, and it always falls by the wayside. So yeah, I don't keep a journal, but I would like to. Sometimes I'll do it for like a month and then it'll fall away from me. But I always get something out of it, and I wish I just would keep up with it. Maybe when I'm less busy.
Yeah, do you get song ideas from journal when you do it? Song ideas?
I bet I could. I don't know if I could pinpoint a moment in which that happened, but I think it's particularly, especially now that I've thought more about writing more nonfiction and prose in general, I think it's really, really helpful for that.
All right, so let's talk about that process. I'm fascinated by the rituals of writers, so maybe we can talk about it as a songwriter and also as a memoirist. How important is environment to you when it comes to place in the house, time of day, things you have to have with you? I find that there are certain rooms that are more effective for me, certain things I have to have with me. I love reading interviews with writers who talk about they have to have a certain hat or certain this. So with both of those things, well, I think it's confidence, right? Like, that if certain things, if you had the mojo once, you were at a certain table or something like that, might happen again. So yeah. So how important is that ritual environment, I guess with both types of writing that you're doing?
Oh, I don't know if it's that important to me, honestly. I've like in my later years, like have become like a retreater, of just like, I like to set off to some place that's actually separate from a place that I can access. And I go with a commitment to leaving with something. That's, I think, been really helpful for me. When I first started doing this, like when I was in my early 20s, and I wrote an album with this band called Birthday Girls. And this guy, Nathan Baumgartner, who plays in a band called And in Portland, his dad had like a trailer in the woods of Oregon. And so we drove out there and we committed to writing an album in a weekend and did. And I think just like giving myself like a tight deadline and like a sick game really helps me. This whole project, Japanese Breakfast, actually started that way. I wrote this album called June, where I wrote and recorded songs every day for the month of June. And at the end of it, I had like 30 tracks of amazing raw source material that largely made its way onto different records. So I find that that's really helpful for me, is like to take a trip somewhere.
Is there a time of day when you tend to get your best writing done, or does that matter at all?
I feel really boring that I don't like have this like incredibly idiosyncratic thing, but I think that nowadays, like, I am so of the opinion that like work is work, like I feel like you just have to put in the time and the work and like create an environment for yourself, that I don't really know if there's like a particular time that works well for me. When I was younger, I was like definitely a nighttime writer. And now I don't really feel like it matters. I feel like what matters is just like sitting down and committing yourself to leave with something, or at least like to put in the work. So I don't think I have a particular time. I'm like not the kind of writer anymore that just like waits for it to happen. I like really feel like if I set out to like go somewhere, like I remember like for 2 of the tracks on this record, I went to the Poconos. I like rented a cabin and was like, I'm gonna leave with the rest of this record. And I think I wrote those songs during the daytime. But yeah, I think it just depends on like whenever I sit down. Like I don't think it matters if it's nighttime or daytime.
So it sounds like you were a pretty disciplined songwriter to begin with. I mean, most songwriters tell me, at least, they wish they were, but they're notoriously undisciplined. But it sounds like you had to be really disciplined, as a writer when you wrote the book, right? You said you wrote 1,000 words a day. So I guess, did you think, did that discipline as a songwriter help you when it came time to be disciplined as a memoirist?
Absolutely. And I think that the whole idea behind writing songs every day for the month of June also helped me like understand that raw source material is supposed to be crap,
Right.
And that so much of the work happens in revision, and creating these like assignments for yourself really helps to create that raw source material. And a lot of it is this sort of exercise in forgiveness, of just allowing yourself to be terrible and trusting that it will get better in the revision process. I do think a lot of that comes from I studied creative writing in college, and so much of the lessons that you get from, that kind of education is that you just have to show up every day and you have to put in the work, and that even though it's creative and there's a part of you that wants to believe it just shows up when it wants to show up, you have to create that sort of discipline, and certainly with writing a book, and it's like that, and I think I enjoy applying that to music writing in an almost embarrassingly like nerdy way.
Yeah, but I think that, have you read the essay by Anne Lamott called Shitty First Drafts?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so it's from a book called Bird by Bird, and it's a great book, and it's kind of what we were talking about, right? I mean, I'm 100% agree with you that the first drafts have to be atrocious. Like when I write first drafts of anything, I don't care about spelling. I don't care about our kids will walk by and they're like, Dad, like, how can you call yourself a writer? Like, look at there's mistakes all over the place. But I just want to I think part of it for me is anxiety, maybe, that I feel like if I stop for a second to think about it, I'm going to think about the fact that I've stopped, and then the momentum really kind of shuts down. So, so for me, at least, it's about just getting the ideas out there. And it sounds like you're the same way. You don't think about in that first draft of anything how good it is at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of happy accidents can happen in that. And I think especially with songwriting, like so much more of it actually than in writing prose is like first thought, best thought, especially
Yeah.
with melody. I think a lot of people will say that, where like, you know, you just have to get something out there, and a lot of the times like your first thought is your best thought. Maybe not with
Mhm.
lyrics, but certainly with like certain sonic elements of music making. I feel like it's much more intuitive than writing prose.
I want to get back to the environment because you mentioned the Poconos, you mentioned the mountains. Are those kind of, shall we call them, forested environments better for you? Do you
Yeah,
find that to be more productive? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely not like a beach writer. I wrote Psychopomp in like this little shed at the bottom of my parents' property in Oregon, in Eugene. And yeah, I feel like all of my writing actually has been largely in forests.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also maybe just being from Eugene, Oregon, I like think of that as like a very cozy place for me.
And when you're writing the book, was it hard to sit down and remind yourself you're not writing a song? Like, did those process ever, I'm curious, that process ever bled over you to remind yourself, I've got to write 1,000 words today? Um, did you find those processes ever bled into the other one, I guess?
I definitely never forgot I was writing a book. I mean, I've never felt like so confronted by my own stupidity as I did with writing a book, because like there's so much mystique that goes into writing music, and also you're just writing in fragments, like you are just like living in fragments, and there's a lot to hide behind. And whereas like with writing a book, like I always felt like there were three steps above that I was like reaching for, and I couldn't get there. And it felt so obvious of like how I could get there or what I wanted it to be. And I just, it was just so hard to get from point A to point B with writing this book. Sometimes of just like simple things of just like, and then we walked to the store, like, and then like figuring out a way to say that's like not just that, or like what else
Yeah.
to do, or just like pacing out a moment. It's like it's a very very different process from writing a song, where like it feels like you have so much freedom to be like quite cryptic, and it's very impressionistic like songwriting, in this way that like you have to know exactly what you're saying, and what you want the reader to know and feel in this moment, um in this way that is very, you have a lot of like outside help in a way. Like sonically, there's just so much like in your toolbox to help someone feel something in a moment, that it's just one thing in writing prose. It's just words,
Yeah.
and so that was definitely a struggle.
So you said 1,000 words a day. Let's say you get in a rut, you're at 700, I can't write anymore. Do you stop, or I guess more broadly, what techniques do you use when I'm not going to call it writer's block, we'll just call it a rut. What techniques do you use? Do you walk away, or do you try to push through? What do you do in those situations?
I mean, I would love to say I wrote over 1,000 words every single day, but I'm sure there were days where I couldn't do it. But even with like June, which was writing and recording a song every day for the month of June, I mean, I was working 3 jobs at that time. I did not have a lot of time. And there were moments when I only had half an hour, and it's just like, but you have to, like, that's the assignment. And I think just making these like sick rules for yourselves, like, is really helpful. And sometimes like,
Yeah.
it was just like, it doesn't matter. Make it complete garbage. And you're just like, well, like you're literally just like vomiting out something. And like 28 out of 30 of those songs, like, ended up great, like, I'm not like repulsed by them. There are 2 songs that I'm like, ugh, but 20 out of 30,
Yeah.
and feeling that way a majority of the time when I was writing them, and then looking back, perspective is just like everything. So I feel like that's what I did, and a lot of times like 950 of those words were absolute garbage. Sometimes all 1,000 of them were garbage, but I needed to like get that going in order to get somewhere else at some point in time, or like it would unlock a sentence that led to many other sentences that were great. And so I'm like a strong advocate for that kind of writing. One thing that is wonderful about writing a book that I wish like there was something equivalent to this in songwriting is my editor had my first draft for 5 months. So I spent 5 months away from this project that I was way too deep in for a while. And then I could go back to it and it was like a whole nother book,
Yeah.
I didn't remember a lot of it. And I could see so much clearer. I remember reading, seeing an interview with George Saunders where it's like there is a light that like you're waiting for like a green light or a red light. Like you mentally like know if something is not working for you. And I feel like that becomes so much clearer if you have like ideally at least 2 months away from something. And so yeah, my first draft was a real mess and I really was like okay with that and let that happen because I just needed to take a break from it. And then when I came back to it 5 months later, I felt like things that I had been so precious about were so easy to dispose of at that point in time. And then I had another like couple of months baked in from the first draft to the second revision and a couple of months for the final revision. And yeah, I feel like that kind of perspective was absolutely essential.
So that first line in the book, did that come to you quickly? I'm just curious because it's so simple but it's so powerful. How long did you work on that first line or did that come to you immediately?
I feel like it came to me pretty quickly. I think a big part of it was like learning from my professor that like you should never like that it's a good thing to like put all like the first sentence of the book, like everything is right there, like it would have been a horrible version where like I revealed later on that like my mom died, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like that was something I like learned from creative writing, which was like, like don't hide like the important detail, like come out with it like right away.
I'm sure you're a voracious reader. So who are some of your favorites? Who do you like to read? How often do you read? I find that songwriters, I think there's a very clear through line between, songwriters who read a lot and write really good songs. It seems to be a pretty clear connection. So, how much reading do you get to do and who do you like to read?
Lately I haven't been doing too much reading just because I've been so busy, but the writers I kind of came up with were like Lori Moore, Marilyn Robinson, Jumbo Lahiri, Philip Roth.
Yeah. Jhumpa Lahiri. I read Interpreter of Maladies for the first time. I'm like 20 years late to the game.
I actually just picked up her new book, Whereabouts, and I'm excited to dig again. But it's incredible. Philip Roth, John Updike, Richard Ford, Raymond Carver. I liked like a lot of Annie Proulx. I liked a lot of like gritty. Oh, George Saunders. I love. I tend to I read a lot of short fiction in college and I tend to really like grittier writers, I guess, or like working class writers that because I think largely like my parents didn't go to college and so I never had I was like largely raised by a parent who was ESL and I feel like I never felt like capable of even writing something like Marilyn Robinson or like Proust, I was never going to write in this like flowery like way or like Nabokov or something, but I felt like I could write like Richard Ford or like Raymond Carver and that they were just as like meaningful writers that explored the human experience in a very simple way in a sense, in a very like straightforward way, and that could be just as beautiful, and that was always something that really interested me and is still interesting to me. I probably read Rock Springs like every year because I just think it's like the perfect book.
Here, like the big four, I find to be Raymond Carver, Bukowski,
oh God,
Kurt Vonnegut, and Cormac McCarthy. Tend to be the big four. But I love Raymond Carver, but why do you think, why do you like him so much?
Well, I think it makes sense for Raymond Carver to be referenced because he's a short fiction writer and, a lot of songs are a type of short fiction. It's like, for me, the type of song that I write is typically like a scene and you have to like use a short amount of space really well. And, lines have to accomplish multiple things and be somewhat sparse in detail. So I think that's why I like someone like Raymond Carver, and I studied him in college, and it's just like incredibly accessible writing. Everyone can like watch, or most people can read a Raymond Carver story and feel something, or like they know those people, and they're just like windows into like how a moment in which like people can hurt each other or change forever, and yeah, I like that about him. I remember too, like, he is so sparse. I remember like we were studying like the edits that like Gordon Lish did, and one of there's this huge backstory about this woman, and Gordon Lish like cuts everything, but like she wore turquoise jewelry, and somehow like you just get that entire backstory just like from that minor detail. And I think that learning how to accomplish that as a writer, and particularly as a songwriter, because you have so little space, is like really essential. And
Yeah. So if a songwriter says to you, Michelle, I'm a songwriter, I don't need to read. Like, what do I got to read Raymond Carver for? I need to be listening to songwriters, not reading books. What do you tell them?
I mean, to each his own, like I know a ton of songwriters that don't read the same kind of stuff that I do, but everyone has, I mean, there's also the type of songwriter that's like more rooted in like the sonic, representation of something than the lyrics, which is I would comes kind of secondary to me. But I've certainly found that reading can be really helpful. There's a Raymond Carver story called "Tell the Women We're Going." And the first line of our first single is "Tell the men I'm coming." So it's like an inversion of that, and that like turn of phrase like inspired that whole song of just like what kind of woman says that,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it can be fruitful. I don't know if it's necessary. There's so many different types of songwriters, but for me it's always been really helpful.
Have you ever read Breeze DJ Pancake?
I have. I have. Yeah. I love that collection. The like one with
Yeah.
the box on it. I don't remember what it's called, but my friend Carrie gave that book to me, and I really love his writing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing he ever wrote.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. That's right.
and then he committed suicide, I think, when he was
Right.
in his
Oh,
20s. But
that's right. I remember this lore. Yeah.
he was, I think he's called a hillbilly Hemingway. He was
Yeah.
a
It's
West
been a
Virginia kid.
while since I read that book, but I remember enjoying it tremendously.
Hemingway has this great line about writing when he says he would always stop when
Oh
he knew
yeah.
he had something else to say, because he
Yeah.
never wanted to start the next day with nothing in the tank. So did you ever think
Totally.
about that? Like, did you
I do
ever?
think about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I had this book of like, I love that kind of factoid. I mean, it like it doesn't, I don't know if I do that. I like the idea of it. But yeah, I mean, like I have this book of like daily rituals that I was playing around with for a while. Like Murakami swims like 50 laps a day or
yeah.
something. Like wakes up at 6 a.m. and Joan Didion, like Maya Angelou like rents a hotel room. Like Joan Didion like returns to her drafts like with a drink like in the evening, and all of those things like sound really romantic. I love the idea of all those things, but I don't know if any of them have really stuck with me, or if I have anything like as a romantic. Maybe I need to start pretending like I do, because it definitely like contributes to like a writer's lore.
Well, I think that's what I was saying earlier. I think it's confidence to me. Like I said, I know that if it's happened before in that chair, why not go back there? It certainly can't hurt. What about the role of movement? I think you just mentioned swimming, but I do find that songwriters use movement either as a way to kind of get out of a rut, and whether it's walking or hiking. I hear swimming a lot, running, that they get a lot of song ideas, or use that as a way to kind of just get out of that. So how important is the role of movement to your writing process?
Not very important.
No, it's not.
I'm like a very stationary indoor person. And I do feel like I like, again, like I like the idea of that, and I think I need to recognize like that kind of thing is really helpful, because a lot of the times I'll forget that rest and like space and yeah, like that's really important. Like I'm just someone that's like very hard on myself, and so I'll get very angry if like things aren't happening, and forget that like doing those types of things I think are really essential and important.